They have to
Good evening, everyone. It is 5 p.m. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, March 8th, 2020. As I said, it's 5 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the agenda? Councillor Connick?
I was so moved we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor? And is Mr. Reyes, is there? Change seats on us.
That's right. I was assigned.
On the side seat, you're just making sure that I was on top, I know where you're at, weren't you? Anyway, request for decision for the 2021 budget timetable, item 5.1. If you could take us through that item, please, Senior Manager Reyes.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Good evening, Council. Before you tonight, there is a request for decision with the intention to establish the timelines for the development of the 2021 operating and capital budgets, as well as the 3-year financial plan and 10-year capital plan. The plan highlights important milestones, ensures compliance with the Municipal Government Act while promoting transparency and citizen engagement. It is important to highlight that the budget timelines this year targets the adoption of the 2021 capital budget and 10-year capital plan in September rather than in November. The primary benefits by doing this is it allows council and administration to focus on capital items in the month of September, and in the following month, in October and November, focus on operating items only. The second benefit is it allows administration to incorporate any operating items that result from any operating impacts, that become part of the operating budget that are related to capital projects that council approves in the capital budget. As part of the public engagement and communication strategy, administration is recommending the following. Council's participation in Music in the Park and Farmers Market as public engagement activities, deploy a budget survey, conduct community group presentations in September and October, and have a budget communication package that we can have on the city's website sometime after the budget workshops sessions are completed. In conclusion, administration is recommending that council approve the 2021 budget timeline and public engagement strategy as presented. And with that, I'm open to any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I would direct the question to you, Manager Reyes, but I don't think you were here for the last budget. I'll have to direct it to our CEO. I know it came up when we did the last budget. We had talked about how these interdepartmental transfers, common services we charge this department, and IT we charge these various departments to try to recoup all that. And I kind of wonder if that works or doesn't work. You would suggest that maybe it's something you might want to get away from. I know when I was first elected, we didn't do any of that, and then there was a change to do that. Is there any talk of doing that in this upcoming budget? Any changes to that effect?
I haven't actually had the opportunity to discuss that with Senior Manager Reyes yet, but that is our intent, is that we would be doing away with those internal transfers wherever it makes sense to do so. As a representative of the Lacombe Police Commission, I would imagine you have some interest there. So there we would see a reduction in both the internal transfer expense as well as a corresponding reduction to the transfer revenue side. So it would be net neutral.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is there any thought at all to, and again, this not only affects the police budget, but all of our budgets, or all of our particular departments, but is there any thought of just doing, every department just as an expense, and then there's just one big slush fund or one revenue fund, where all the revenue goes in there, and every department is just, it's an expense, it's expense lines, there's no revenue in any department. Is there any thought to moving towards that type of budget or not as of yet, or is that something, is that a good idea or not, so that we can get away from?
So we are always in support of simplified budgeting reporting that makes it easier for council to make policy decisions, and I think there's aspects of what you've just described that would, I think, fit in with that. I would say, although we could certainly present on the net expense, which would be sort of the total expense minus the revenue, as council, you would probably be best served by still seeing both the total expense and the total revenue at the very least, so that you see which departments are recovering a portion or a significant portion in some cases of their cost. But we could certainly look at summarizing the expenses and maybe having a summary sheet on each department that talks about the total expenses in that department, the total revenue, and then the net expense to the city and to residents. Would that be in line with what you're talking about?
Again, I'm just throwing that out there. These kind of things that come up during our last budget deliberations. I thought, okay, going forward into this year, with the internal transfers and this idea, maybe that's something administration needs to explore. I'm not suggesting it needs to be done, but just as a thought, maybe you could almost put together our typical budget, and maybe, I know it's more work, but you could put together another one that's a little different. I don't know, just a thought, because it's just an idea worth exploring.
So I don't think it should be too much work, actually. We can definitely add, so we'll have our typical budget, as you've seen in the past, and like I say, we'll add to the summary sheets sort of a more concise number about the expenses, the revenue, and the net expenses for each department. That way you'll be able to see it at a glance a little bit easier.
So it might help clarify these types of ideas if anyone has some, or sees some direct benefit of changing the existing reporting procedures. As I think we would all be open to seeing the process improved however we can. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. This refers to our policy, what do we call this, our taxation policy, but anyhow, part of that policy, it says that funding outside agencies, that they should have their business plan and budget to the city by November 1st, but yet in this timeline, we always ask for it much earlier than November 1st. So I was curious, is the policy just a fallback, that for sure by November 1st, or why do we ask for it earlier yet our policy says November 1st?
So the policy is November 1st. What we've found is that makes it very difficult actually to pass our budget in a timely fashion. So what we've proposed to do in this new process is that we'll be asking for some preliminary input from those community groups in April. Remember?
In the fall, I believe.
No, I believe that the timeline asks for August. Thank you, sorry. In August, we will be looking for that information back from community groups. That doesn't preclude them from coming in when they make their presentations to saying, actually, we've had a change. but we're hopeful that that'll give a little bit more certainty to council when you're passing your budget. I'm sure you'll remember, it's always been kind of a challenge where we bring a budget to you that's balanced, but it includes all or none or a select few of the community group requests, and that can make it difficult after the fact. So we're gonna try and get those numbers earlier. Hopefully groups can provide them, although I expect there'll be some that still have some last minute requests.
So, well, I certainly encourage debate and back and forth. We should really start off with a motion, so if somebody could make one, I would appreciate it. Councilor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I will move that council approve the 2021 budget timeline and public engagement strategy as presented.
Thank you. So does anyone have any additional questions or concerns with the time frame and whatnot as laid before us? Laid out before us, rather? Well, so much for the motion driving. Question, so if there is none, then I will ask the question. All those in favor? Thank you. The next item up, once again, Senior Manager Reyes. This one's for you, item 5.2, bylaw 477 for the supplementary tax bylaw, proposed for first reading.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council tonight, there is bylaw 477 supplementary assessment. As per the Municipal Government Act, a supplementary assessment bylaw must be passed by a municipality in order to be able to apply taxation to properties that have been completed after July 1st. And then we can calculate the amount of taxes that the property owner would owe to the municipality, and we can send that once council has passed the bylaw. Every year, the amount that we collect from taxes that derive from supplementary taxes is somewhere between 65 and 75,000. So tonight we are asking council to give first reading to bylaw 477 supplementary assessment. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you. I'd like to start us off with the motion. Councilor Gullickson.
Thank you very much, Mayor Creasy. I don't have any questions, but I'll make the motion that council give first reading to bylaw 477 supplementary assessment.
Thank you. Does anyone require any clarification on this annual item? I see a bunch of lights on, so I will ask the question. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And you're on such a roll, Manager Reyes, you might as well continue with item 5.3, bylaw 478 for the line of credit proposal, first reading.
Thanks again, Mayor Creasy. Before council tonight is a motion for council to give first reading to bylaw 478 line of credit. Every year we need to have a bylaw that will authorize the municipality to be able to access our line of credit, which is $3.5 million. And this line of credit can serve as a safeguard for operational expenses in case our cash balance falls below our current levels. In past years, we haven't been using our line of credit often. The last year that we used it was in 2006, but it is there in case we need it. and that's why we need a bylaw. And with that, I'm open to any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Councillor Konik.
I also move that we give first reading to bylaw 478 line credit.
Thank you. So, Senior Manager Reyes, I'm just curious, you've got a maximum interest rate set here. Is that just because we have a variable one, or is it not for public disclosure? Why just a maximum?
The maximum is based on the fact that the line of credit is on a variable rate. So it's based on prime minus 1%. As council may know, interest rates are actually lower than they have been in recent months. 6% is a ceiling that we need to have in the bylaw. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we would be paying, but it is a ceiling that needs to be there. It can be lower too. We can definitely go for a lower rate. 6% is just a standard that we keep in the bylaw.
Appreciate the clarification. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. You said a question for CEO Gowdy. Quite some time ago on a couple of agenda items on a previous council meeting, with some of these agenda items that are, I guess, annually repetitious as to an annual requirement. A few items we did all 3 readings in one night. In this case where it was the same, could we not do the same to simplify it for administration or not? Sorry.
So we could. We actually discussed that administratively, whether we would go ahead with recommending 3 readings as we have in the past. Let's say the direction we've inferred from council is that the use of all 3 readings or the passing of all 3 readings at one meeting is for extraordinary circumstances. We had plenty of time to get this together, and so in this instance, we didn't feel there were extraordinary circumstances that would warrant all 3 readings in one reading. I don't think there's any risk to transparency or good governance for 3 readings on these purely administrative bylaws, but just as a matter of course, I would say what we have inferred from council is that the default should be at least 2 opportunities for debate on bylaws whenever possible. And that's the only reason.
Anything additional before we vote on first reading? We'll call the question then. All those in favor? Thank you. So just as, given that last comment, was there any appetite for second reading this evening? Very good. Seeing none, we will move on to the next item then, item 5.4, land use bylaw 400.28. Director Thompson, could you take us through this item, please?
Actually, if I could.
Chief Gowdy, go ahead.
Your Worship, that item should be deferred until after the public hearing for the same bylaw, which is happening, I believe it's scheduled for 5:30. So I would recommend moving to the council committee appointments item, and then we can move into that public hearing. Actually, let's read this one. 402.24. 402.24 can go ahead.
I believe I may have misspoke by that. If in fact I did say 0.28, I would have mistook that it is 0.24. Can we continue with that one?
We certainly can.
Thank you, Director Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So this is before council for 3rd reading, bylaw 400.24. In previous readings, council has indicated desire for some amendments to the bylaw. And coming up 2nd reading, we have added the provisions around the temporary storage that council had requested at that time. The final outstanding matter being related to the 2-meter side yard setback provision that's in the bylaw, and in response to the landowner who had proposed, or who had presented at the public hearing. And so the administration in its memo has, or in its report, has proposed 3 options for council's consideration to be included in third reading. Option A is a site-specific amendment, so this would include passing the 2-yard setback requirement, but creating an exemption for this one landowner. There is, after the memo was released, there is actually another kind of similar situation within the DARP boundary, where someone has subdivided lots that are fairly narrow. They did not come forward and spoke to us about this, but certainly the principle is the same. It is not reflected in the plan number under Site A, but if council wishes to provide a site exemption, then I have the plan number here for council's consideration. The lots are the ones just south of Popo's Park, where I think it was the Genesis Church before used to be. Those are subdivided into some fairly narrow lots, and they're zoned R2 right now. Option B would be applying or exempting all properties that are less than 10.5 meters in width. This would account for 4 of the 5 lots owned by Mr. Wilson, who presented last time, and would allow for an exemption for any future lot that is fairly narrow. Now, one thing that just wanted to highlight was that we believe the intention of this greater setback in the DARP area was to encourage a more consistent type of density in downtown, and by doing that would allow, having the setback would provide for that. If council considers narrow lots to be exempt from the greater setback, it's possible it may encourage or may create more narrow lots to avoid that setback provision. And so just something for council to consider. And then option C being no changes, can keep the bylaw as is. It would be a 2-meter wide setback with no exceptions. And so those are the options that we are proposing for council's consideration. Our recommendation is the site-specific exemption, which would include Mr. Wilson's lot, and then the additional plan number that I can give to the motion, or give to the reader of the motion at that time, if that's council's wish. So if there's any questions, then I'm here to answer.
Councilor Jacobson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to question about option B. So for the 5 remaining lots, for the landowner who spoke, is the 5th one already developed, or is the 5th one a vacant lot as well too?
The 5th lot is just greater than 10.5 meters.
Okay, so then even if we went with option B, he would potentially have to come back to Municipal Planning Commission for his 5th lot development then?
He would, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So even though I'm more in favor of option B, to me it seems to be defeating the purpose if we don't address all of the developer's lots.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I appreciate and respect reviewing this to address all those involved, but with the appeals or at the public hearings, from my interpretation, it's more of the multifamily lot in the first place, not really the 1.5 or 2 meter setback. Is that, like, it's, like anybody who's having the vision of a narrow multifamily housing in an established bigger lot, they'd rather see them on the corner, so there's more parking was one big issue. So are we really accomplishing anything for the developer by going from 1.5 to 2 meters in the first place? Because it's not necessarily the number of lots, it's that zoning is being applied for in the first place. Is that the way I would interpret it, or could you please correct me if I'm wrong?
Cody?
So I would say, because you'd asked, is it accomplishing what the developer's going for? A lot of the changes that have been proposed in 400.24 do provide additional certainty to developers and lower some of the regulatory processes that have been built up over the years, or lessen the burden. This particular change, I would say, is probably not to the developer's benefit. It is more of an accommodation to those existing properties that are neighboring potential infill. I agree with you that a lot of times the concern there is not necessarily about the setback or the specific aesthetics of the development itself. A lot of times that it is more fundamental than that. It's not wanting to see increased density that may affect them negatively. Parking, for example, being a great example. The 2 meters, while I don't think it will address all of the concerns, I think that having that increased side yard setback will make sure that infill development looks a little bit more like the existing character of the neighborhood, where a lot of those setbacks are more like 2 meters or even 3 meters on those larger lots. So it's providing a little bit more screening, it's lowering the intensity of the development a little bit, and it's making sure that that infill development is complementary to the existing neighborhood that it's fitting into. I don't think it does anything to address parking, or that it will necessarily result in substantially reduced neighborhood concern about the infill development. I think there still will be concerned neighbors when there's infill development that's resulting in higher density in their neighborhood.
Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Director George, or Director Thompson, the Plan B, why does it not cover his last remaining lot?
Just because this last remaining lot is, we'll call it more of a, getting into more normal lot size, it's a little bit wider. And we just have to create a line. And so if council wanted to look at, one of the challenges is the lots that Mr. Wilson owns are zoned R4. And so R4 has quite a broad number of developments that can occur within it. And there are a number, for instance, there's R2 lots that are similar in width as his R4 lots. And so tying any setback exemptions or clauses to his zoning won't capture them all. And so the tying it to a lot width is something that we can kind of capture an intent across the whole DARP area. And simply the last one, his last lot is greater than 10.5. We could say 11, but that just means that more and more lots are exempted from that setback, the larger we go. And there are not that many, very few lots that are 10.5 meters or less. That is a fairly narrow lot size. And so it's just a matter of trying to provide an exception for this landowner without, I guess, watering down the full intent of this provision in the bylaw in the first place by exempting too many properties.
So it would take a full meter out of his building space then if we don't have that lot exempt, is that correct? Because that one would have 2 meters on each side.
Correct, yeah, yeah.
Satisfied with your answer? You're good? So just for further clarification on that item, so in addition to the lots of which the owner spoke to, and then there's a few more that are close to Popo Park area, you referred, that is all of the RN1 or R1N lots that will be specifically as exempt, is that what I understand?
Yes, if council chooses a site-specific option, I'd recommend adding lots associated with Plan 1722619. Those are actually R2 lots, and then Mr. Wilson's are R4 zone lots. So neither of those are R1N zone lots, okay. But they are both plans that have been subdivided and are pending actual building development, and those are the only ones that we came up with that are in that same boat.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson, I think that you were up next.
Sure. So I'm going to do something odd and actually have an argument with myself in front of all of you. even though I personally prefer, what would happen in terms of development with option B, and my opposition to this whole 2-meter cider thing has been established, I accept the fact that it is the vision of council ultimately to accept the outcome of this 2-meter cider for that area. So I actually believe if that is the will of council, that option A is probably the more preferable option. Because I do believe that if we did go again with a 10.5 meter or less, regardless of district or zoning, it genuinely would lead probably to an ultimately more of a densification of that area. So I believe that the concern at the last meeting that was spoken was that developments that had already been approved, investment decisions that have been made under previous rules, there should be a respect of that. And I think a site-specific exemption would speak to that, but it would also eliminate clouding the vision that council had for this area with specific regard to this amendment. So again, I'm going to argue against myself previously, but so I'm actually going to move that council give third reading with the option A amendment and the addition of the site plan that Director Thompson had outlined.
Thank you for that. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would agree with that except for the additional exemption. Only because, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Thompson, Mr. Wilson's lots, he's subdivided, but he's put services in already, has he not? Whereas the Genesis one, they may have subdivided, but I don't think they've actually taken that next step where they've actually put the services in. So therefore, they have a little more latitude there in terms of what can be done. Is that true?
They're separate lots. I'd say correct. Yeah, I don't believe there's separate services in there. There's still some options that you may have in terms of condoizing that set of lots there. That would allow them to service maybe up one parcel. I don't recall the service size and whether that's feasible off the top of my head. But yes, I'd say you're correct that Mr. Wilson has seemingly invested a little bit more into this development, or is a little bit farther down than the subdivision of the other lands.
So I think that is a correct distinction between the two, but I still struggle with changing the rules partway through a development like this. And if these are the two areas, I feel that they should both be included. Whether or not one or either of them will come to fruition with the changes, that's up to the property owners, but myself, I would prefer to see them both. Anyone else? Councillor Connick?
Just for clarity, can we have that motion reread, please?
Absolutely, that was next coming up here. So the way that Councillor Jacobson had proposed it, please.
Councillor Jacobson's motion was that council give third reading to bylaw 400.24 with the amendment for option A and addition of site plan 1722619.
That addition being the property that was outlined or referred to earlier as the Genesis property. Okay. Everyone's clear on the motion before us for the third reading? I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Gullickson, so noted. Thank you. The timing on that one was relatively good, so that we can be on time for our public forum item, our public hearing item regarding 4.1 land use bylaws amendments for bylaw 400.28 for the Trinity Crossing Phase 2 rezoning bylaw. And as mayor, I declare that the statutory public hearing for bylaw 400.28 open, and that this hearing is being held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 230, 606, and 692 of the Municipal Government Act 2000 as amended, and request the legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of the public hearing and that the statutory public hearing notice was advertised in the local newspaper, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda package are now read into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So Mayor Creasy and Council, the purpose of this public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input to the proposed bylaw 400.28, the land use bylaw to rezone lands which are described as part of Northwest Quarter Section 324026 west of the 4th Meridian and part of closed road allowance CFT 082247200+1 from future designation District FD to residential detached district R1. This was given first reading at the February 10th council meeting. For section 606 of the MGA, requirements for advertising, the public hearing notice was advertised as shown in the Macomb Express Thursday, February 27th and Thursday, March 5th, and I've confirmed no written submissions were received.
Thank you. I'll remind all persons giving oral presentations are to clearly state their name, and presentations are to be brief and to the point. The order for the statutory public hearing presentation will be as follows. First will speak the development officer or designate. In this particular case, our Mr. Teal from Parkland. And then those in favor, then those opposed, and then any person deemed to be affected and wishes to be heard. So, I declare that the public hearing is open at 5:35, or 5:34 rather. Mr. Teal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Just to add to what the legislators, executives added, we did check before 4:31, or right after 4:31 about any additional submissions, and there were none in our emails this time around. So happy to report that. The request before you is to basically redesignate to R1 to allow the next phase of subdivision to happen in the Trinity Crossing outline plan area. It's basically extending Trinity Crossing road right up, Trinity Drive, right up straight north, splitting the area in half with about 28 lots on either side. So that's the area outlined, the large area outlined in pink. Then across the north, kind of forming a T, is a dedication of a lane that would serve some of those lots and also fit in with the long-term plan for the A1 plan, also in the RFD. It shows lots with lanes on those as part of future phase 3 and 4. The application is consistent with the North Area Structure Plan. It's consistent with the approved outline plan. We received no comments one way or another from any members of the general public. It was circulated broadly to the neighborhood. Staff are recommending approval as it is consistent with council's approved plans for this particular area.
Thank you. So first off, I will call for those in favor to speak now. Mr. Bonci, I expect that you're particularly interested in this item and certainly offer you the opportunity if you care to use it.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your attendance.
Absolutely.
So once again, anybody's choosing to speak in favor? And seeing none, I will move into those opposed. My expectation is that you're not choosing to speak to that either.
Oh.
I appreciate you reminding us, Mr. Teal, that there was no additional submissions that were not put forth after the cutoff. So any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard can do so now. Does any member of council have any questions for Mr. Teal before we close this meeting? All right, I declare the public hearing for bylaw 400.28 closed at 5:38. And while we're on the subject, then we will move into our request for decision on item 5.4, proposed second reading for the Trinity Crossing Phase 2 area. Director Thompson?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I have nothing to add to Planner Teal's report. Staff are recommending second and third reading tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would go ahead and move that council give second reading to bylaw 400.28 as presented.
Thank you. There was a few lights on there. Was all for the same purpose? Councillor Connick? Councillor Gullickson? Yes? Any additional questions or concerns with the proposed second reading before us? All those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council give third reading to bylaw 400.28 as presented.
Thank you. One more time, I will ask if there's any questions or concerns this time with third reading. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And unanimous as well. Thanks, Council. So the next request for decision item is one from Chief Gowdy regarding some of our committee appointments. Item 5.6, please.
Before you is a recommended appointment to the Affordable Housing Strategy Steering Committee. This is an active committee that has recently adopted an updated strategy for expenditure of some grant funding that we've received, and there's some funds set aside by the municipality itself. We are recommending this evening the approval of the appointment of Kim Willington to the Affordable Housing Strategy Steering Committee with a term to end December 31st, 2021. Bylaw requirements for this particular board are between 6 and 8 public individuals from the city of Lacombe, in addition to the 2 council members. We are recommending this appointment of one new applicant for a 2-year term. Sitting member expired February 26, 2020. We do have a reappointment coming up for this particular committee as well. We just didn't hear back from the individual quite in time to release the agenda, so that'll be coming to your next meeting. The resume for Miss Willington is in the in-camera portion of your package. If you have any questions about the process, we can answer those now.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Having known this individual, she's more than qualified, and I would like to make a motion that the council approve the appointment of Kim Willington to the Affordable Housing Strategy Steering Committee with a term ending December 31st, 2021.
Thank you. Was there any reason anyone wanted us to defer this item until after in camera? I didn't expect so, but I had to ask the question. No additional input? Very good. All those in favor? Thank you. Chief Gowdy, time for the Chief Administrative Officer report, please.
Thank you. So as we just saw with some of the land use bylaw changes and even our rezoning for Trinity Crossing, third reading being given, we are expecting to see some new development in that area starting in the fall here. And I just wanted to highlight that development permits and building permits in the city of Lacombe continue to be strong. We are seeing continued residential development. We have active development in the commercial, industrial, and residential sectors in the city of Lacombe on virtually all peripheries of the community, on all 4 corners of the community. In January, actually, we had over $5 million in building permits, which would make 2020 the strongest I've said in recent history, but actually I only put the recent in because I don't care to do the research to go back 100 years, but I would expect that it is in history, the entire history of the community. So certainly 1 month doesn't make a year, but we have a great, really strong opening, and we're excited to see development continuing in the community, despite a weakening provincial economy, which of course we saw some disappointing news about the price of oil today, and I'm sure that'll be a topic of discussion into the future for our community. Other than that, my report is there before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Anyone have any questions for Chief Gowdy on items contained in the report? Looks like you're getting off that pretty easy. Seeing none, we will move into council mailbox. The service level review letter from the police commission is 6.2A. Does anyone have any questions or concerns with that, or Councillor Connacht, if you would care to go over any of it, you're certainly welcome to. Very good. No other lights on. 6.2.B, cold shot bus service cancellation is February 24th. Would you care to comment on this item?
Did they ever run? I never saw it.
Well, I think that was a really common thought from us. Perhaps our CEO would care to comment on the timeliness of this letter.
So I can't comment whether they ran for a month or 3 months or 6 months. When we received this letter, the previous letter had come to council, and it was at a time when the letter actually carried some weight because we were considering our own public transportation needs. And so I thought to make sure that we were providing the balanced reporting, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, we wanted to make sure this letter came to council as well, just to let you know that service was not successful in starting up and providing bus services between Lacombe and Red Deer. They were not able to make it.
No additional comments? And the next item up was a concerned resident letter over a water bill dated February 24th from this is Vivian Dobbin, who's in the gallery with us this evening. Unfortunately, from time to time, we do have these similar types of situations when, for various circumstances, citizens are faced with some unusually high bills. I think to start out, I will give our CEO an opportunity to tell us what is involved in this process and perhaps just to outline briefly how it is that account holders learn of this issue.
So typically an account, an account holder is going to learn of the issue very close to when we learn of the issue. So we'll go out and do a review, a meter reading exercise, which involves a radio. We have radio read meters that we switched to in the last 5 years. And so someone will go and drive their van, actually, our utility van, so up and down every street in the city, and they receive data from each water meter within each home in Lacombe. And at that time, if there was unusual usage, such as has been experienced by Ms. Dobbin, it would highlight that, and our utility would notice that. Of course, the ultimate notification to the resident is the receipt of a bill that is several times higher than their typical bill, in this case, many times higher. I guess I would say, unfortunately, the municipality does not have any provisions in our current utility bylaw that would allow for addressing of this sort of a situation. One of the challenges being, of course, that the city receives its water from the city of Red Deer, and so there is an actual cost associated with each meter of water cubic meter of water we distribute, and the majority of that cost is purchasing the water from the city of Red Deer. So if you're, I believe the bill of the per cubic meter rate is around $2.42 per cubic meter right now for water.
From Red Deer, it'd be 211 from Red Deer.
Right, and sorry, I believe it's $2.42 to residents, and I believe $2.11 is our cost to the city of Red Deer. So the majority of the cost is actually incurred by the municipality. So the bylaw does not have the provision to provide compassionate relief, even in the case of a very compelling situation here. That is something that Senior Manager Reyes and I have discussed, of whether there would be an opportunity in the future when we go into looking at this utility rate bylaw again, whether there would be the opportunity to provide some sort of relief in situations like this where there's a spike in usage, a definite source as to the spike, and then it can be verified actually that the problem has been remedied, that perhaps there is a situation for the city to participate in that, or to city ratepayers in general, I guess, to participate in that sort of item. Right now, that does not exist, and so any sort of direction for a reduction in this bill or relief to the bill would need to come from council in the form of specific resolution to this issue.
Thank you. I guess, as I said earlier, this has happened from time to time, and I just wanted some better understanding of the process. Given our electronic read system now, do we have the ability to provide some sort of a report a little faster than the time that it takes to generate a bill for someone to realize that something has went awry? I mean, I think we can all agree this is not in the city's best interest to forward these costs on to individuals. It's not like this is a great moneymaker or whatnot. It's just a recovery thing for us, for all intents and purposes. So, do we have that ability? I'm not suggesting it's to the minute or the hour. But are we doing everything we can to notify individuals rather than expecting it to go through the entire system? I get it, and receive it by mail and know that there's an issue, or in fact, do we even have that ability to do so? Is what I was referring to.
So the ultimate solution would be a real-time meter reading system, and you can get tower-based, fixed-based systems that would read those meters in real time and could provide alarms for sudden spikes in usage or reverse flow, that sort of thing. When we looked at that here in the city of Lacombe, I think it was around $300,000 in addition to the $1.4 million that we had expended on transferring to radio read water meters, and so at that time it wasn't selected. We are able to highlight, we can pull up hour by hour usage. Once the operator has downloaded that data, they can look at the hour by hour usage on the radio meter read data and identify when the problem occurred and whether it's been resolved or not. So they can note when there's spikes in usage. I cannot tell you one way or the other right now of whether there is a flag that comes up when that data is downloaded to say there's an anomaly at this address or anything. So I guess I can't give you, I think what you're looking for is an assurance that when we would receive a bill like that, the utility clerk would immediately call the individual and say, hey, we've noticed something awry with your bill. I would have to look into whether or not we have that ability or whether we're doing that process. Unless Senior Manager Reyes, if you are aware of that right now, but I don't know.
I'm not aware that that's part of the process, no.
We would have to look into it and let you know whether that is part of the process. I don't know here today whether it is.
Oh, and that's fair enough. I appreciate we don't have the Cadillac system, the hour-to-hour readout radio transfer system. I want to know that we are giving our residents the best possible notice that we can in situations like this. Not unlike the individual here, I went through this myself, and it is, it's disconcerting when this happens for anyone. In this particular case, they are extremely high. So I want to know that we're doing everything so we can cut down the length of time that that meter is racking up a bill. In the vast majority of cases, without the individual whose property it is knowing that this is in fact happening. So if we could put together some sort of a briefing for that coming up, I would certainly appreciate it. Councillor Koenig?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think this is the first time that this council has seen this type of thing come. I have seen this in my time on council and previous councils that I've sat on. And it's unfortunate, but I think we should be doing something. To me personally, I think we should actually not expect our citizens to pay this bill. I mean, I think if traditionally you use this much and all of a sudden there's a spike, clearly something's happened, whether it's through fault of their own or otherwise. I would like to think that we don't make that expectation that they pay that difference. I mean, yes, we're trying to recoup our money from Red Deer Regional Water, but I mean, I can only think of we very recently had a water main break at a major intersection, and every day I drove by there and the water's flowing. Who's paying for that? Obviously we as the citizens are paying for that water. It flows down the drain every day. Same thing here. This is an unfortunate occurrence. I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of extra money to pay for something through no fault of their own. And I just think, I've seen this before and it gets awkward and people get upset, and I don't know, I think it's an unfair expectation. So to me, I think each of our utility reserves, each of our utilities have reserves, whether it's garbage, sewage, or water, and we just draw from that reserve to account for this and be done with it. I mean, it's obvious how much they use. This is clearly an anomaly. Something's occurred. They shouldn't have to pay for it.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. First of all, my condolences to you that you shared that in here, that your husband just passed away. I too am a landlord, and I guess I wondered if it was, in my case, I still felt like this was my responsibility. So I don't totally agree with Councillor Koenig. If someone is not in a residence, we have to have someone checking on it a certain amount of time, and it seems like there might have been a period of time that no one was checking on this residence. And we do have that obligation for our insurance. I guess I would be open to not necessarily levying the whole cost, but we do have responsibility as landlords to oversee our property. So I appreciate the grace you're extending, Councillor Koenig, but I also think we have some responsibility as landlords.
Councillor Gullickson? You choose not to speak?
Well, he was.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I also extend my condolences. I agree 100% with Councillor Hoekstra on this, because the first time. Being that it's a rental property, especially, I mean, there is a responsibility as the landlord to check that property when the tenants are away, and to ensure it's like the heat is on and the different things happening within that property. I think there might be 2 units there, so maybe that's not as necessary to check the heat. But the water, I would think if it's a long time when that tenant's gone, that property should be looked at. So I agree with Councillor Hoekstra.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. I guess it's, now we're not debating a motion here, but we all seem to be chiming in on this. So, yeah, and again, with all due respect to the citizen here sitting regarding this issue, I guess I would also very much concur with Councillor Hoekstra. This council has gone to tremendous lengths in the past, sometimes in my opinion unnecessary lengths, to monetarily repay citizens for issues where city has been at fault. And I can think of property tax issues, and I can think of other issues. And I think the line has to be drawn between, if it's property that's in ownership of somebody else, what happens in that property, whether it's, by accident or whatever, there has to be responsibility for that. So while I believe, individual cases may be very compelling, I think it's a gigantic can of worms you open, frankly, if we're going to start this reimbursement process. And then who determines, which cases are compelling, which aren't, who determines, if the reserve's been used up, if we say no, I mean, to me, it's, it's unfortunate, but it's clear. So I would also not be in favor of that. I mean, I have no idea, perhaps CEO Gaudy can tell me, does the city perhaps offer extended payment terms, perhaps amortizing the property taxes or something like that? Are those things that are offered to citizens in this case?
Both of those are options, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I guess just an item of clarification between a regular item of business. This one happens to fall under information items, so it's a little unusual when you mentioned that it didn't start off with a motion, which is point well taken, but therein lies the difference between these two.
Sorry, I was acknowledging that it's odd to discuss this without, because it is information, so I apologize. What I meant is it's interesting to have this kind of discussion, but regardless.
Right. And certainly any of the items that are up for information, that's why I call for comment and whatnot, but no point taken for sure. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. The only point I want to make is that's a compelling argument when you say you're the landlord, but if I say I decide to go for a week's holiday tomorrow, and it's just my house, and my kid runs in the house and says, I gotta go to the washroom before we leave, flushes the toilet, the flap stays up, and we leave for a week, is the expectation that I'm having someone check on my house for that week, or, I mean,
Yes.
I don't know, I just think it's clear when there's anomalies occur like this, that there's a reason for it. It's not something has failed, whether the flap stayed up, or there was a leak, or whatever. I mean, like I said, I've seen this before, and it's a lot of stress for the homeowner, whether they're a landlord or the homeowner or not. Clearly something's happened, and whether, in most cases, it's just not their fault. It's just, like you say, the flap stayed up. So, I mean, I don't know, it's a lot of money.
I guess that serves as a good reminder for everyone watching at home, especially if you are going to be leaving your property, you may want to consider turning your water main off as well. For those that have the ability to do that, for certain mechanical reasons you can't, but I certainly do when I leave for a period of time, both for insurance items and items such as this as well. So, Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do like the idea, and I had the same idea as Councillor Jacobson about sort of getting this over a period of time or adding it to something like a property bill. So what would the appropriate action perhaps be to ask administration to come back with some options, or is that taking too long? I guess that's my only concern with that idea.
I think that if that was the desire of council, that we could direct administration to work with the individual and come up with some sort of payment plan or offer, make the offer to the individual would be a relatively easy direction for us to give. Chief Gaudy?
So I guess just so council's aware, we make payment plans as a matter of course with customers all the time. That wouldn't require a special council motion or anything.
That would not, okay. And I guess my only other consideration, sort of reflecting some of Councillor Connick's concerns, you had referenced that it's $242, but we actually purchased it for $211. Perhaps worth considering that we maybe forgive the city administration side of things, if that's even possible. If I understood those two different rates correctly, again, a consideration, because it gives a little bit of a break then, and that would bring it down closer to about, I think it's 12% or something that adds on, the difference between 211 and 242. My math could be wrong, but anyway, yeah, just for consideration.
So if in fact that was a consideration, there would be some more to it than that, because I suspect that a portion of this is from wastewater as well. And with that type of mentality, I would expect that we would want both.
Yes.
The in and the out. Okay. So is that something that council wants to consider in light of this letter, or no? Councillor Connick.
The difference between the two rates, is what Councillor Hibbs suggested?
Correct.
Absolutely, whatever, yeah.
Because, well, this is information portion. you do have the ability to make motions now as well. So if you're considering that, then now would be the time to do so.
It's your idea.
I'm trying to, reflect the conversation that's happening here. So do we have to include the portion about coming up with a plan, or just the simple idea of whatever mechanism you come up with that is reflecting simply the dollar value that we pay for the water and the wastewater? I guess I'm trying to get clarification of what that motion needs to look like to reflect what my idea was.
And that's a fair question. I'm not sure if this even requires necessarily motion from council, or if with our direction, if administration has the ability to make some administrative adjustments for that, or how that works, but I'm sure Chief Gowdy will explain it to us.
So for the payment plan, that's no problem at all. I don't think a motion is required or any direction there. With respect to your other direction, which is basically that all of the overhead and the city's administrative costs would be taken off of the bill, and it would be strictly the water and sewer purchasing costs from the city of Red Deer. I would say your motion could be that the bill is reduced to reflect only the cash portion of the cost that the city absorbs for these utilities.
I guess if that's clear to administration, then that is what that's my intention. So if that captures that intention correctly, then I am fine with making that motion.
So everyone's clear with the motion for us? No lights on, I will call the question. All those, oh, there's one. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Councillor Jacobson.
I'm sorry, and I realize I'm going with the world's biggest jerk here. But I just have to speak strongly against this, because this is a revenue property, and there was an unfortunate and ill-timed expense that happened. But the principle of this is that the cost is being downloaded onto the taxpayer for this. Okay? And I get there's extraordinary circumstances here. But to me, the principle of this is that this was certainly an unexpected cost. It's extremely unfortunate. But now the taxpayer, even if it's for a few $100s, is going to carry the cost of that. So even though I want to personally stress that I find the personal circumstances very compelling, you have to vote against this for this principle.
Thank you, Councillor Jacobson. I happen to feel the same way. This is just a very uncomfortable situation to be in, but I don't think it's any more or less palatable for the remainder of the public to pick up a portion of someone else's bill when this certainly was not, in my opinion, any fault of the individual who wrote the letter that this in fact occurred. It certainly is not the fault of the remaining bill payers in Lacombe either. That is for certain. So yeah, it's a difficult one for certain. Councillor Connick.
Now there's a motion, I'll argue in favor of the motion. Again, it's an unfortunate circumstance. I think we're all focusing on the fact there was a landlord. I mean, this could have just been a homeowner. Again, it's an honest mistake. Again, when I see a water main running, water break and water running day after day after day, we as citizens, as a community, are paying for that water. And, try as we might to get it fixed in a timely fashion, we're still paying for the water. Same thing here. So it's just, I would argue in favor of the motion. I think it's the least we can do.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. If we start this, so one of our landlords in town comes in, he has an apartment building, the toilet's been running for 3 weeks. He comes in and asks for compensation. What's the difference? Really, I don't know what the difference to that is, if he has an apartment building or if it's a duplex, it's the same principle.
Right, and I would argue that he'd be extended the same consideration. It's just these things happen. It happened to me. I'm only arguing, not for weeks on end, but when I had my store downtown, I flushed the toilet at night, I came back and it was still running. So it was 1 day's worth, but I didn't mean to have it running. I mean, it's just an accident, right? It's the same thing. I mean, it's an anomaly. It's not. They clearly didn't want this to happen. Again, not a lot of money in this instance. For me, I would say forgive the whole amount. Clearly, nobody's in favor of that. So at least we can do is acknowledge that these things happen. And again, I've seen this before. This is not a first time for me. I think it's the first time for this council, but not for me. I've seen other instances of this happen where, you know, a toilet fails unknowingly. And again, it's unfortunate, but they shouldn't be hammered to this extent. I've seen bills higher than this, and again, for an unfortunate circumstance.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess my only point why I specifically honed in on the administrative part of it is the fact that the toilet was running for, say, 20 days did not cause administration to work extra hard, but they're collecting a ton more than they're necessarily entitled to because the bill's larger. Like, it's proportional, right? So that would be my argument as to the city of Lacombe is not really losing out on something by forgiving the administrative side of it because we never put the work in the first place. So I guess that would be something to consider. But I hope you do decide to support it. I guess we can go ahead and take the vote if nobody else has anything else to say.
Councillor Hoekstra.
So just to clarify, then the water still would be charged.
The water still would be charged.
So the motion before us then is?
Councillor Hibbs' motion is that the utility bill be reduced to reflect the cash portion of costs the city absorbs for the water and wastewater utilities.
Very good. All those in favor? And those opposed? That is defeated. I think it was safe to say that there's still an expectation from council for administration to work with this individual this time and any others to help ease the burden if and make payment arrangements on these types of incidences. That's understood?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. And the next item up, the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission minutes. Anybody have any questions on that item? Likewise with the Regional Wastewater Services Commission minutes. Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Under point 6, under the operational report, it refers to something called candy canes. Just curious, what are candy canes?
In which report was this in the
Right there.
wastewater?
Right, Manager Houston, the first line.
Very good. We happen to have an expert with us, so I'm going to call upon Director Thompson to explain that to you, and that's a fair question.
So it's, in one of the lift stations, there's different programming. It turns pumps on and off based on the levels called the wet well. And the system can either have these floats, but these floats will float up and they'll bend, and that motion will trigger some action. So like usually pumps turn on, or when they straighten out, pumps turn off. In this case, they're having some issues with that system, and the candy canes is a different type of technology that allows for the detection of the water level, the wet well level. It's kind of known in the industry among operators as candy canes, but it's just a different technology to detect the wet well level to allow that programming to do its thing.
And then there was a couple, or one from Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission. From the two meetings held concurrently on the same day, rather, from November 27th. Any questions with either of those? And Councillor Dawson, looks like you were at the Municipal Library Board meeting from, you were not there?
I was not there.
Well, then we're going to be hard pressed to ask you about it, aren't we?
Yeah.
Was there any questions from the January 28th minutes? Seeing none, Councillor Hoekstra, go ahead.
Sorry, I feel like I'm bugging everybody, but in these minutes, they have motions made by Christina, and I just think it might be helpful to have a last name because it appears that the staff member's making the motion, and I'm guessing it was not. I'm guessing it was a board member. It's just a suggestion for the minute taker.
So we can move into councillor reports. Councillor Gullickson, did you want to start?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. On February 13th, I attended the Fair Deal panel. An interesting discussion on the relationship of Alberta with the federal government. It seemed like most people wanted to stay within the Confederation, but hoped for more attention from Ottawa. On February 19th, MPC meeting, one item on our agenda, home-based business that required additional parking. And that was an interesting discussion about that particular business, a yoga studio, so hopefully that works out. Lacombe Days meeting on February 23rd, we are starting to put some final touches on the events. Bull riding committee was at our meeting and expressed concerns about parking, which I think we addressed, in food service, which might be something we need to look at, as we understand that our confection area there has exclusive rights to the arena, is that correct? And they can't bring in food trucks or anything else, even if it's unable to handle the load, is what I understand. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that issue, that if they are to talk to our arena staff, we would certainly be able to help them out.
Oh, okay, because that was one of the concerns, is that it was overwhelmed, like they could not handle it, yeah. And they wanted to have additional food trucks outside to assist with them getting their beverages or burgers or whatever, and they were told they could not do that.
Okay, I'm not sure. I haven't discussed that with arena staff, so I would have to look into that.
Yeah, if you could just double check and make sure that's true, that'd be great. And then had a library meeting on March 2nd, and they approved the final draft of the budget. We discussed usage of the library, and the numbers seem to be very good. They're getting new shelving to add additional books, and a lack of space was brought up again with the library working with Joe's social media to do blogs. So what that's going to be is that they'll actually go over to Joe's office and do the blogs as part of the library program, which I thought was innovative and kind of a nice way to work. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
Do you have it, Ross, or no?
Yes, I do, sorry.
I submitted my report on the 3rd, and Ross didn't get it for whatever reason. I think Telus crapped out on me.
Yeah.
So I did get it in on time, it just didn't get to the agenda on time. Anyway, the only thing I wanted to highlight was I attended the press conference in regards to the Celebration SSS 50th anniversary. And again, it's one of those organizations, when I moved here and prior to being on council, I had no idea what SSS does. And it wasn't until I was on council and sat on that board that you realize how many people they touch, from seniors to youth to parents to kids to everybody. And it's a wonderful organization, and I know they have some other events planned for their anniversary, and it's my hope we can attend those as well. But I felt it was important to be there for that. That's the only one I wanted to comment.
You obviously have a very fast internet connection if you had items from March the 7th on here and you submitted on March the 3rd.
So I did submit on March the 3rd. I can show you the email. I just added that because I knew I was going to that.
Just wanted to make sure. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So the FCSS media event recognizing the 50th anniversary, and I'm sure as a board we'll be announcing some events that will be at future meetings. The Lacombe Regional Fire Services meeting in January. Received an update from the Regional Fire Services Chief of the 6 municipal fire departments of some equipment Paraguay project continues to get equipment down to that area, so that's a very passionate project upon the volunteers. And those receiving that equipment are very receptive to it in that area. Was on the Fair Deal, what was that one? Sorry, I didn't write it down. The Fair Deal panel. I thought it was a very low attendance, and it somewhat was a little repetitious. It was a little interesting, but and the Lacombe Days was discussed a few issues, just fine tuning with the Bolorama Committee, concerns also of security and parking and placing of events to accommodate everybody. So the ongoing changes in insurance actually creates some interesting details, to say the least, so that may be concerning in the future, but it's just, there's a lot of responsibilities to that. That's when you find out the fine print. Anyways, so that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs? Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra?
So my report is in front of you. I have changed my report. I don't put things on it that haven't happened yet, so because I always used to do exactly what Councillor Connick did. But I attended quite a number of community events in the last little while, and I wanted to highlight them because, yeah, I go there as a city councillor. I did sign on to an AUMA webinar, and I just, it was not as informative as I had hoped to be regarding the budget, but I'm still glad I did that. As for the media event for Lacoma District FCSS, 25 years ago I sat on its board, so I did know what it did in our community, so that was kind of cool. And then, of course, I've worked for that agency, and now it can celebrate 50 years, so that's exciting. On the next page, I went to the interagency, and then I was going to go to the chamber meeting, but I did miss that. But what they discussed at the chamber was the relocation of that office, and I received the minutes, and their number one choice is that chances are the chamber will be moving to the county building. But they will, so that's my goal. And I just wanted to highlight, I've been to some birthday parties in the last little while, and that one of our key developers in our city did turn 80, hand spelled, so that was kind of cool to be there.
Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra. Just to clarify, I'm not 100% sure the county building, which building you mean?
The county office building out in the country, yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, they have offered up space. It's not finalized, but that's what came through in the minutes.
Councillor Jacobson?
I'll have my report for next time.
As will I, so thank you all. I believe that's all the information items that we have, if someone would care to accept those. Councillor Jacobson?
I move we accept the mail-in reports as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Very good. And next, item up 7.1, we've got minutes for review from February 24th, the regular council meeting minutes. Everyone had a chance to review those. If there's any revisions? Councillor Hoekstra.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. So did anyone have any notes that they wanted updated or changed on there? No? In that case, all those in favor? Unopposed? Thank you. There are no notices of motion this evening. And just to review, I did not miss any items here. What do we have? So we just got a couple of items in camera. If we could have a motion for that when we come back after a short so that you can talk with media. Assuming Todd would like to talk to anyone this evening. So it is now 6:24, about 6:40. 15 minutes, that'll be enough time I would expect. We'll reconvene then. Thank you.
How's that serving the city?
But she made it.